Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about Pakistan and India relations. As we all know that the DGMOs, the Director Generals of Military Operations of both the countries, they've agreed regarding the ceasefire on the line of control. If you just look at the last year, 2020, there were around 3,000 LOC violations. 3,000, just imagine. Around 33 people got martyred during the shelling from the Indian side, and hundreds of people got injured as well. The youngest martyr was a 3-year-old, whereas the oldest was a 75-year-old woman. So you can well imagine the kind of tension these people go through. The unfortunate part is that Pakistan cannot retaliate in a way the Indians do, because the Muslims are living on the other side of the border. So today we'll be talking about the DGMOs of India and Pakistan held discussions over the established mechanism of hotline contact. The two sides reviewed the situation along the LOC and all other sectors in a free, frank and cordial atmosphere. This was the press release by the ISPR. In the interest of achieving mutually beneficial and sustainable peace, the two DGMOs agreed to address each other's core issues, concerns which have propensity to disturb peace and lead to violence. This was again stated by the ISPR. And both sides agreed for strict observance of all agreements, understandings and ceasefire along the LOC and all other sectors, with effect from midnight, which is 24th night and 25th morning of February. Both sides reiterated that existing mechanisms of hotline contact and border flag meeting will be utilized to resolve any unforeseen situation or misunderstanding. So primarily, great news hailed by the United Nations, by the Americans as well, because when you talk about these two nuclear neighbors, nuclear rivals, two countries, unfortunately they do not have great relationship as far as foreign policy is concerned. And again, the major issue, the bone of contention is Kashmir. Now, to talk about this, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio, on my right, is Air Vice Marshal retired Ikramullah Bhatti Saab. Bhatti Saab is a senior defense analyst. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. And on Skype, we have with us Dr. Asma Shakir Khwaja Saiba. She is an expert on foreign affairs. Ma'am, thank you so much for your time. And we have with us Ambassador Asif Durrani Saab. He's a senior diplomat. Thank you so much, Durrani Saab, for your time as well, sir. Let me start off from you, sir. After a long wait, sir, finally the DGMOs, they've agreed regarding the LOC violations, sir. Just look at the number, 3,000 violations, sir. That's almost about 8 to 9 violations a day, if you calculate it that way. 33 people got killed. Hundreds were injured, including children and elderly. Now, sir, do you think they will be able to basically accept what has been talked about? And do you think this is going to continue, or at some stage, you never know, because this has been the history?
Well, yes, this has been the history, because as we just mentioned, in 2003 we had a similar agreement, and which lasted for about 5 years. Until 2008 there was no violation, and from 2008 to 2014 there were violations off and on, and from 2014 onwards, ever since Mr. Modi and his party came into power,
it was a regular feature.
It was a regular feature, and as you just counted, just last year we had nearly 3,000 violations, leading to death of over 30 people in Pakistan. Well, what are the prospects of this agreement staying in place and hopefully peace returning to the LOC and staying? If we look at history, we cannot be very hopeful. But the fact is that now that both the DGMOs have met and they have agreed to the ceasefire, and there is no more violation taking place, so we can expect and look forward to some interval of peace. But the fact is that this has not come about just like that. out of the blue. I mean, there was work going on behind the scene, and we also see that there has been pressure mounting on the Indians for the last couple of months. And while Pakistan has been bringing it to the notice of United Nations every time a violation took place, we even took the foreign envoys, we even took the defense attaches of different countries. We even had an inspection done by military observer group, which were at that time fired upon,
Yeah.
which was again reported to the UNO. So that was on one side, but we see that in the recent past, over the last couple of months, India has been coming increasingly under pressure. We have seen there is increasing pressure on the border from the Chinese side. Then we see that the human right violations have now been noted in world media and world parliaments, and India is now being pointed out where human rights are being violated. We've seen within India there was this after the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, there was a protest from the Kashmiris. Then we saw that there were protests on the Civil Rights Act, then the Delhi riots, and then now we have the farmers agitating in Delhi. And so India has been increasingly coming under pressure. So
Internally
internally
and
as
from
well as
external-
externally.
yeah, okay.
So in order to look good and eventually say to the world that India is prepared to talk, because whenever we spoke of Kashmir, India in the international forum would always say that it's a bilateral matter and that Pakistan and India will settle it themselves, but the Indians were not prepared to talk about it. So I think in order to look good before the world, and of course pacify the situation vis-a-vis the Chinese, and at least to cool off one front and sit with some kind of comfort with the Chinese, because right now they have a two-front situation. And while the Indian generals may be boasting that
Even regarding the LSC, the negotiations are going on, sir.
Yes.
They want to diffuse the tension there as well.
certainly, so I think these are all the pressures that have been on the Indian side for them to eventually come to this situation. And I think as long as the Chinese continue to maintain their view, the Americans continue to insist on resolving issues, I think there will be better sense prevailing on the Indian side, and I hope that the peace that has now come to the LOC will stay.
All right. Now, Asma Shakir Khwaja Sahiba, as AVM Sahib just mentioned, that they have internal issues and they are building up a lot of pressure on the regime. And when you talk about the external factors, for example, there is new administration in United States of America. Then you have this Chinese issue right on the northern side of India. You talk about the LOC. You talk about the farmers' protest. You talk about the issue of CAA. You talk about the issue in Kashmir, farmers. I mean, there's so much going on in India. Ma'am, do you think the Indian government is under pressure at the moment, and because of that pressure, they have taken these decisions?
See, I would say that all this situation, as you mentioned, are the enablers which are creating an environment in which maybe Indian government has realized that confrontation, aggression, aggressive is no more beneficial for their national interest. Maybe I'm too much optimistic, but the point is that if even Indian government is thinking in those lines, Pakistan, like a responsible international actor, should try to utilize that perception of Indian government for the betterment of the people of South Asia, who are actually living at the brink of war for last several decades. So even if it is under Indian government is posturing it under international pressure, domestic pressure, and because of the mess they have created on international borders and in domestic front, Pakistan should take it as an opportunity to move forward. It is this act of ceasefire on LOC reminds me Pakistan's acceptance for ceasefire on LOC reminds me Pakistan's act last year same days when Pakistan returned Mr. Abhinandan as a peace initiative, as a confidence building measure, as a as an act for de-escalation of tensions between Pakistan and India, only for the sake of betterment and development and peaceful coexistence of millions, billions of people living in South Asia. And here I would like to mention that if and when two countries want to move forward or want to peacefully coexist, the first step is to cease violence in the conflict. So for me, such agreement, and we wish, fingers are crossed, that India would abide by the promise they have made and the abide by the agreement they have done for peaceful for ceasefire on the LOC. If this is the first step, this is the first step to bridge the trust gap between the two countries, which is much wider because of the anti-Muslim, anti-Pakistan policies of Mr. Modi for last during his tenures in government. So definitely it is the first step, and we can only hope as the student of South Asian studies that this would not be the last step. So this is really important, and you know, when we say that we will ensure ceasefire on LOC, we are humanizing the conflict. We are not talking about the power game and power equations on border. We are talking about the safety and security and peaceful existence of the individuals, of the humans living on LOC. This is really important, that the misery and the terror people living on LOC they are facing, that is being addressed and that is being acknowledged by both countries. And I hope that this ceasefire would continue till Pakistan and India move forward on, hopefully, if Modi government would remain positive and would remain willing or inclined towards resolving issues, so maybe it can open new avenues of de-escalating tensions. I would not use
This is what we
the
can hope
term
for, ma'am.
the
But again,
very
you know, the element of trust deficit, that's there. And then we talk about these
yeah.
CBMs. I mean, sometimes they make sense, and most of the times they don't. Now, coming to you, Ambassador Saab, one important, interesting story is that according to the National Security Advisor, or the Assistant to the Prime Minister on National Security, Mohid Yusuf Saab, he has said that though they have welcomed this restoration of the ceasefire along the LOC, but having said that, he's also mentioned that behind the scenes, a lot of efforts were going on. So, who were behind this, sir?
Well, as Mr. Mohid Yusuf has already said it, if the behind the scene efforts have been going on. So naturally, because it not a revelation all of a sudden they would sign for. I'm sure behind that there were many to and fro. I mean, discussion going on between the two countries. Having said that, one reason why we do that was that right now Pakistan has downgraded the relationship with India. We don't have ambassadorial level relationship with them, so our high commissioners are not in place. Most, in any case, have been in contact of the year 24/7. So therefore, that forum was available. Of course, behind that, then the political decision was taken by both sides and India. Of course, it is just not Pakistan and India. Had this been so, which India had been insisting in the past, but they never addressed the core issues, including Jammu and Kashmir. So this was a way, and they would always try to, sense dilly-dally and then, bypass the issue. So that was the case always. But this time, there are many factors. You have said it. Air Marshal Saab has also touched upon those. External factors have also played a role because now, if you look at the news media, they are talking about peace along the line of control. Earlier, it was India which was at the receiving end. When they took the action after 5th August 2019, they revoked Article 370 and 35A, and then they put a complete lockdown. In fact, it reminded us the Auschwitz camp in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So then they had, the whole international media. In fact, not a single day passed by when India was not under the radar, and they were not subjected to criticism. And then gross human rights now, I think that is off their back. I think for us, we were faced with double jeopardy. One, because the line of control, if it is hot, it is it is a loss for us in our Azad Kashmir as well as in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, because on the other side of the line of control, again, the people are Kashmiris. So for Pakistan to respond to Indian provocations or to Indian attacks, so Pakistan has to be very careful that the human losses, especially for the civilians, should not take place. So for us, I think we should take a solace that line of control has is now quiet, and hopefully it would remain quiet. Because if you recall, from 2003 till 2014, this was a quiet line of control.
Exactly, indeed. All right, I'll just get back to you.
Once
I'll get back to you, Ambassador Saab. Your voice is breaking up. I can't hear you clearly. So I'll just ask and request my production team to sort of engage you once again, because you're breaking up and we can't make out exactly what you're saying. So we'll just get back to you on that. But coming to AVM Saab. Now, eventually sense seems to be prevailing, sir. Now, when we talk about the overall attitude, I think things have changed during the last couple of months also. Especially it seems that the Narendra Modi and his associates, whether it's Ajit Doval or Amit Shah and the rest of the gang, I would say, sir, they believe that there is a lot of pressure because of CAA, as you mentioned. And then you talked about the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, snatching the special status of the Kashmiris. You talk about the protests, the farmer protests that have been going on, sir. Interestingly, not only in Delhi, sir, they are everywhere now. And it's really threatening, because these people really mean business and they're not going to back out despite the kind of offers made by the government. And especially, again, another very important area is about the image of India, the secular India. Now people have, in fact, their own people have started writing about it, that it is no more secular. It is Hindutva. It is primarily the party of extremists, and they are bringing in those kind of laws and just making sure that the non-Hindus should suffer in one way or the other. I mean, whether you grant them the second-grade citizen or the third. Now, sir, do you think that is going to be the major issue? The internal pressures have built up, sir. Opposition is not that strong in India, unfortunately, but still they are vocal.
Well, I feel that the entire turmoil in India essentially emanates out of the policy or the concepts of RSS. Because despite this statement, the joint statement by the two DGMOs, there was a statement by the leader of RSS saying that the concept of Akhand Bharat will continue to remain as the
top agenda.
As the top agenda of the Indian policies. So that unfortunately will continue to plague the Indian environment or the internal environment until the government is able to rein in these ideas, these concepts. But unfortunately, they have been made so popular, and the BJP has been winning after making these slogans popular and getting votes, that it will be very difficult for the Indian government, especially and the BJP, to convince their people to kind of downplay or ignore these concepts which have been propagated by RSS. So, that is a huge challenge, because that is what is also affecting the image of India overseas, because of this religious extremism and intolerance towards minorities. And I think yet there is another reason for this ceasefire to come about is, or a change in Indian attitude to this issue is, that the Americans are eventually would be eventually leaving Afghanistan, and if this region is to become peaceful, then the Afghanistan situation is not the only trouble spot. The next is, of course, and equally important, is Kashmir. So, I think when the Americans pay attention to this issue, I am sure they would be asking Indians to do something about Kashmir, so that it can become peaceful, and the outfits like IS in Afghanistan do not find a place in the Indian illegally occupied Kashmir, because
But sir, IS is being supported by the Indians.
Well, you see, that is the case today, but tomorrow when the Americans leave and the Taliban are in the driving seat, then IS will have no place there, and the next fighting arena that they would find, or fighting ground that they will find, would be Kashmir. So, and then of course, this region is likely to again continue to face insecure situation. So, I think when the Indians are taking interest and bringing about peace across the LOC, besides several other considerations, this could be one consideration because of which the Americans have been asking the Indians to do something about this issue. So, it's not just the domestic pressure or the pressure on the Chinese border, or the Indian image being spoiled all over the world, but it is also the American kind of a nudge that the Indians should do something about it, I mean, besides human rights. But I think this is another angle that the Americans would be looking at as and when they leave Afghanistan, that they would like to see that if this region has to become peaceful, then the another trouble spot which is equally important is that Kashmir.
Another important area, and sir, that is about the current situation. You look at most of these Kashmiri leaders, either they are in various jails, including Tihar jail, the kind of misery they are going through. I mean, you read their stories, and honestly speaking, sir, you feel like crying, because that's what, whether you talk about the female politicians, they are under arrest. Look at the situation of Yasin Malik, for that matter. He's so sick, he has got kidney problems, and there is no treatment. Do you think, sir, at some stage the Indians might also look into those accounts and try to settle down the issue as well? Because LOC violation and no violation is one step towards peace with Pakistan. It has got nothing to do with the internal politics, I guess, sir. Do you think, sir, at some stage, because recently there was this about I'm not sure exact number, but it was around 2,000 diplomats who went to Kashmir. Obviously, they were shown what Indians wanted to show them, but that was another, I would say, step in the right direction, because Indians had no other choice. I mean, you talk about the military observers group. They have never been allowed to go there in the Indian side and see, whereas we always welcome them.
Well, yes, the Indians have eventually realized that they need to draw the attention of the world to a situation where the Indians should start to look good, and the image that has been built up over a period of time, that India is inflicting atrocities and causing terrorism in their part of Kashmir, that has to be addressed. So, besides what you mentioned, there is another positive development from the Indian side, is that they have allowed or opened 4G internet in the valley. Besides, of course, the visit of the diplomats to that region. So I think when Indians do decide to soften up or bring about normalcy in that region by taking these steps, I think next would be that eventually the leaders would be released, and I think they would behind doors would be seriously considering reversing the step of 370 and 35A. And finding some mechanism to do that, because that is a very popular demand of the Kashmiris, and that is a precondition by even Pakistan as well. So I think these are the two steps that Indians would be very seriously considering these days as they move forward on this track after, of course, allowing the internet and visit of the diplomats. I think next would be, of course, that they release the leaders and reconsider their decision of abrogation of these two articles.
All right. Now, Asma Khwaja Sahiba, we have also learned that most likely the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be visiting. As a goodwill gesture, do you think this has been done in that regard, just prior to the visit?
See, if we see that India is a regional country which has made SARC dysfunctional and which is not allowing to its SARC to function properly because of its hegemonic designs or because of its agenda of point scoring against Pakistan. So if they have learned from this thing, and they have learned that by dysfunctioning SARC, India cannot achieve any of its objectives. So why should Pakistan be worried about it, and why should Pakistan not appreciate this gesture if Indian Prime Minister intends to visit Pakistan and reactivate SARC, which is practically dysfunctional? And I would like to add a bit that when you say that India took almost 2,000 diplomats or facilitated their visit to the Indian occupied Kashmir, I would like to say that, see, maybe this is the result of Pakistan's proactive diplomacy, because when India takes the diplomats, international foreign diplomats to Kashmir, it means India itself is internationalizing Kashmir conflict. India itself is trying to portray a picture in front of international community. So such act also indicates that somewhere India itself realizes or understands that Kashmir is colonized by India and Kashmir has been occupied by India. And that is why, in order to set their scorecard perfect, they are taking diplomats to create an image. But at the first place, the need to create that image indicates that Kashmir is a disputed territory and Kashmir has been internationalized. Otherwise, Modi government would take the leaders of maybe political parties of India, domestic leaders of India, the cultural, political, economic leaders of India to Kashmir, not the international diplomats. So taking them, it means that Pakistan's proactive diplomacy to highlight the grievances, to highlight the misery and torture of Kashmiris has been successful, and that is why India is taking diplomats there. So yes, internal politics of Kashmir, and this reminds me a book by Indian former Raw Chief Mr. S.K. Dullat, and he wrote that Modi, the BJP, has created a mess in Kashmir, and maybe because now after creating the mess through this evaluation of Article 370 and inculcation of Citizen Amendment Act. So by these acts, Modi is unable to clear the mess himself has been created. So whatever, as I said earlier, the pressures are, the best thing is that Modi is trying to revisit its policy of aggressive posturing against Pakistan. So this policy should be Pakistan should not, and you know what this reminds me, if you remember, when Mr. Imran Khan, the Prime Minister, took oath, the first initiative, the first international commitment he made was about opening Kartarpur corridor. So it
Correct.
means that forging peaceful ties with India and creating or facilitating different confidence building measures with India is and always be number 1 priority of Pakistani government under Imran Khan. So we should see it as, and when now India, after posturing against Pakistan so aggressively, 27th February happened, Pulwama, Modi's statements, even now you mentioned that Indian minister is talking about Hindutva and this greater India thing. So despite all this mindset, the structural realities, the structural framework has
Plus,
been
ma'am,
pushed
I guess
Mr.
a
Modi
lot
that
of
he revisit
pressure has
his
also been
policy.
generated because if you look at the American publishers, or for that matter, even the British, you talk about Washington Post, you talk about Times, you talk about
Yes,
Guardian,
yes,
and so they've all written regarding these issues, the violations in Kashmir, currently this
yes.
ongoing protests of the farmers, and they've been making headlines even in the mainstream media also, ma'am. So I'm sure that has also
Yes,
put the government of
BBC
India under a lot of
Independent,
pressure.
like, yeah, I found the reporting of BBC regarding Kashmir conflict as most balanced and
Exactly.
rational reporting, and that only talks about that how Kashmiri is being subjugated under Indian colonization.
Correct.
So, and then when we are talking about the Modi regime, which we are speculating, assuming that maybe Mr. Modi would try to fix the mess he has created and visit Pakistan with definitely positive intentions. So, when we see all these reports or these rumors, it is really for me, it is really heartwarming that Pakistan's initiatives, whether it was Kartarpur, whether it was returning Abhinandan, whether it was always extending hands of friendship to Indian government, whether it was the statement of PM Imran Khan that India would take 1 step and we would take 2 steps if
Correct.
towards peace and sustainable economic development. So for me, this is uh, I would say success of Pakistan's desire, Pakistan's acts, Pakistan's policies, which always aimed at peaceful conflict resolution between the two nuclear powers in South Asia. So I think we should keep analyzing the situation, that how what words and actions government is taking, and if the actions of Modi governments are supporting or complementing the words they are using, and then maybe this is the time we have to watch and see. And as I wrote in my book Shaking Hands with Clenched Fists, the Grand Trunk Road to Confidence Building Measures between Pakistan and India historically used these peace phases or these phases of de-escalation as as the time to regain, realign, and re-strategize its policies against Pakistan. So,
All
but
right.
still, we should not lose hope, and we should hope for the best and see that how much Modi government is serious and determined to take maximum benefit, positive, constructive benefit out of this situation.
Well, ma'am, as far as trust is concerned, we just can't 100% trust the Indian regime for sure. But at least if they do something which we consider is right, and they also believe that it's a step in the right direction, then I think one should hail it. Now, ma'am, coming to you, Ambassador Saab, future of SARC, that is another very important area. Do you think that is going to get some sort of attention this time? And plus, since the UN chief, the White House, they both have actually hailed the decision taken by the governments and the DGMOs in particular, so that the relationship is restored once more, sir. Your take?
Well, there are talks about holding of SARC summit in Pakistan, which is already overdue since
Yeah.
2016, because the summit was to take place in 2016. But due to Indian intransigence, it did not happen. But at the same time, when you talk about SARC summit, so there will have to be many steps which are to be taken first to upgrade the diplomatic relationship between Pakistan and India. Then second, as Pakistan has demanded that India will have to reverse the constitutional amendment of 370 and 35A, and then they have to lift the lockdown and make the life of the Kashmiris easy. And for revocation of Article 370, even Indian commentators are now talking about uh, a judgment from the Supreme Court, because Modi cannot go back to the parliament, and probably the one course left for Modi is through the Supreme Court, and already a case is pending in the Supreme Court. So that is a possibility. But it all depends that when you change the mindset, then I think atmospherics improve, and it has happened in the past between the two countries. But the core issue is Kashmir, and India has also, after taking these drastic measures such as revocation of Article 370 and 35A, and then heavy lockdown, they could not achieve those results, those objectives. And for all practical purposes, even the Indian leaders are saying, political leaders, even belonging to BJP, like Yashwant Sinha and others, that we have lost Kashmir. And this we have lost Kashmir is a statement which has been repeatedly said during the past 7 decades. Whether you talk about Jayaprakash Narayan in the early 50s onwards down, you talk about Morarji Desai, even Mr. Morarji Desai, even Mr. Vajpayee did talk about the alienation in Kashmir. Narasimha Rao talked about it, but he talked about the sky is the limit, and as far as autonomy of the Kashmiris was concerned. So these are the talks which have taken. The main issue is that India could not convince the Kashmiris to become the Indians. So that's why for them the political course left is that the Kashmiris, their voice should be heard, their right to self-determination should be honored. How it takes place, that can happen through a political dialogue between Pakistan and India. And that's for the Indians to decide, because already during
But
the past
Ambassador
7
Saab, I
decades
mean,
we
the
have been
Indians, they
facing
have
this.
invested
Yes.
so much. Whether you talk about the demographic changes they have made, and they're still making in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, or the kind of attitude they have towards the Muslims out there, sir. And especially, a lot has been going on, and there is a proper planning. So this could be just, maybe a symptom they have shown that, see how balanced we are, and we are doing so much for the Kashmiris, and this is the right approach of India. But you never know that, as they say, Bagal mein churi, muh mein ram ram, sir. That is the case, indeed.
Well, that has been taking, and I mean, if the history is a guide during the past 7 decades, Indian governments have been, resorting to these gimmicks. But what was the result? All their steps, in fact, increased the alienation of the Kashmiris against India. So right now, despite their full might with almost 800,000 in the troops, for each 9 Kashmiris, there is 1 Indian armed soldier. Uh, what have they achieved? Now, if they want to convert the Kashmiris into Red Indians through these domiciles and changing the demography, that is, I think, not going to happen, at least in the coming decades. Reason being that right now, even the Indian leadership cannot dare to visit occupied Jammu and Kashmir. They cannot dare even to raise their flags in those areas where the Kashmiris are, and and whenever there is an opportunity, those Kashmiris rise up and they raise Pakistani flags. They only wait for the opportunity. So those opportunities, I think India has not offered anything which can, in fact, bring in some solace for the Kashmiris. Their solace would be when their voice is heard and their demands are accepted. And also they talk to Pakistan, because Pakistan is a party. We are a stakeholder. So if India thinks that they can, by resorting to those actions, they can, gobble up Kashmir, that would be very difficult. They did try with the Chinese on Ladakh, and then they had to taste their own medicine. So I think there is a lot of rhetoric going on that. They want to change the demography, and but the question is, who is going to live there? That's the issue. Yes.
All right. Now, Ambassador, let me put this question to AVM Saab. AVM Saab, the opposition in Pakistan, well, I don't have much to say about it, but they say that there's some sort of a change on the Kashmir stance, and they're blaming the government of Imran Khan as if he has sold Kashmir to India.
Well, that's unfortunate that, in our
shouldn't they be hailing his steps towards peace in the South Asian region?
In our domestic politics, the government is always opposed by the politician, regardless of whatever it does.
Correct.
And even if it accomplish something or achieves something domestically or internationally, the opposition is supposed to oppose it. And it is sad that we haven't yet achieved political maturity in the country where the politicians start to appreciate good steps, support the government on international issues which are of national interest. But that will come about through maturity, which is yet to be achieved. So hence, when we see the narrative of the opposition, even on international issues of national interest, they continue to oppose the government, which is unfortunate. But I guess over a period of time, there will be better sense and wisdom that will come into our politics.
How long will it take, sir? It's been over 72 years now.
Well, yes. The politicians always complain that they haven't been given their due time to exercise or practice their politics.
Maulana Fazlur Rahman Saab has been the chairman of Kashmir Committee for I don't know how many times and for how long. And he has done nothing. Rather, he spoiled the case in so many ways, sir. I mean, and when he comes up and issues a statement against the government that, see, you are responsible, it doesn't make sense to me at least, sir. Don't you think that when it comes to the international issues, when it comes to issues like Kashmir for that matter, the opposition and the government and all the other major stakeholders, any other politician also, they should be on the same page, sir?
There is no denying this. But again, as I said, it's a question of political maturity. And it is unfortunate that you see when there is a domestic opposition to the government on such important national issues, it actually weakens the stance of the government internationally.
Yes, it does.
And on the negotiating table or on any international forum where you have domestic opposition and on a stance or a position that the government has taken internationally on a matter of national interest. Which is sad, but I guess even in the international forums, the international people or the institutions or the countries do realize and appreciate and do study and understand this, that if there is a domestic opposition, it is for a different reason. It is for domestic consumption, and it is primarily because those politicians are yet to learn the finesse in politics. And
very well said, sir.
And unfortunately, they will take time to learn that.
But anyway, sir, AVM Saab, was a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much. Sorry, we're running out of time. Ambassador Saab, thank you so much for your presence. And ma'am, it was great to have you in the show as well. So that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you inshallah tomorrow with a different topic. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.